The person who hates you most is often not reacting to your flaws, to the terrifying brightness of your untapped potential. This visceral animosity creates a heavy, silent friction in your social interactions, leaving you with an unexplained sense of isolation or a lingering weight in your chest. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung identified this phenomenon as the confrontation with the shadow, a hidden key to understanding why excellence often attracts hostility rather than praise. In a few moments, you will discover why being good is exactly what triggers the darkness in others, transforming your social anxiety into a profound realization of power. Human interaction functions as a sophisticated system of projections, where individuals rarely see one another as they truly are. Instead, people navigate a landscape of internal images, casting their own unlived lives and suppressed desires onto the people they encounter. This psychological mechanism operates beneath the surface of conscious thought, dictating the sudden shifts in mood or the irrational coldness found in a professional or social setting. When someone perceives a quality in another person that they have denied within themselves, a deep structural tension arises within their own psyche. This deepening friction is not merely a disagreement, it is an existential threat to the ego's carefully constructed narrative. The ego works tirelessly to maintain a specific self-image, often one of modesty, safety, or moral superiority. However, meeting a person who embodies freedom, success, or raw authenticity shatters this delicate balance. The observer is suddenly forced to confront the vast distance between who they are and who they could have been. This realization is often too painful to process directly, leading the mind to translate this internal agony into external resentment. The target of this resentment becomes a living reminder of a path not taken, a talent suppressed, or a voice silenced by fear. As this tension expands, the social dynamic transforms into a silent battlefield of perception. The resenter begins to look for justifications, searching for minor flaws or perceived moral failings to diminish the individual who makes them feel inadequate. It is a desperate attempt to regain psychological equilibrium by pulling the superior figure back down into the familiar territory of the average. This process is rarely intentional. It is an automated defense mechanism designed to protect the individual from the crushing weight of their own mediocrity. Yet, this defensive layer hides a much more complex reality regarding the nature of human identity. Understanding this shift requires looking past the surface of the conflict to see the invisible lines of energy connecting two minds. There is a strange phenomenon where the most virtuous actions produce the most aggressive reactions from the surrounding environment. While logic suggests that kindness and competence should be met with gratitude, reality frequently demonstrates the opposite, where brilliance acts as an unintended provocation. This occurs because the human psyche does not seek truth as much as it seeks comfort. When an individual radiates a high degree of consciousness or achievement, they unintentionally illuminate the dark corners of everyone else's internal world. This light does not just reveal the beauty of the achiever, it exposes the dust and clutter in the observer's own life. The uncertainty grows when one realizes that being liked is often a sign of being non-threatening, a signal that one has successfully suppressed their power to keep others at ease. To be truly authentic is to be disruptive to the collective slumber of those who have chosen a path of least resistance. This creates a haunting implication. The more you grow, the more enemies you may inadvertently create among those who are stagnant. The hostility you face might actually be the most honest feedback you will ever receive about the magnitude of your own evolution. But this realization brings us to a much deeper layer of the Jungian perspective on the human soul. The human subconscious operates as an invisible system, a vast reservoir of energy that contains every instinct, memory, and potentiality that the conscious mind has rejected. Jung proposed that we do not merely live our lives, we are lived by these hidden forces. This internal system functions like a sophisticated biological computer, running background programs that influence every judgment and emotional reaction. When an individual encounters someone who possesses a trait they have buried in their own shadow, the system triggers a projection. This is not a choice, but a reflex. The observer throws their own internal darkness onto the other person, seeing their own repressed anger, greed, or even their own unacknowledged greatness in the face of the stranger. This model of perception shaping reality suggests that the world we see is actually a hall of mirrors. We are rarely interacting with objective humans. We are interacting with the ghosts of our own rejected selves. If a person has suppressed their own ambition to fit into a safe, mediocre role, seeing someone pursue a dream with relentless passion will feel like a personal insult. The brain processes this external success as a psychological wound because it highlights the observer's self-betrayal. The resentment that follows is a form of psychic scabbing, a rough layer of anger intended to protect the ego from the raw, stinging truth of its own cowardice. On a behavioral programming layer, these projections dictate the flow of social power. Groups often work unconsciously to maintain a low level of collective consciousness because it feels safer. When one member of a group begins to integrate their shadow, becoming more assertive, more creative, or more honest, it creates a ripple effect that destabilizes the entire social structure. The group may respond with subtle sabotage, mockery, or exclusion. These behaviors are the immune system of the collective trying to eliminate the foreign body of individual growth. This suggests that the resistance one feels from others is actually a measurable indicator of one's departure from the herd. The friction is proof of movement. Integrating psychology with a controlled, mystical interpretation allows us to see this as more than just a social glitch. It is a cosmic necessity. The shadow projection serves a vital function. It makes the invisible visible. Without the enemy who irritates us or the hero we envy, we would have no way of knowing what lies within our own depths. The people who resent you are, in a strange and mystical sense, your most important teachers. They are pointing directly at the power you have claimed, which they have not. They are the guardians of your threshold, testing whether your new identity is strong enough to withstand the pressure of public disapproval. The subconscious does not care about your social comfort, it only cares about wholeness. Therefore, it will continue to create these collisions between people until the projected material is finally recognized and brought back into the self. This means that the intense resentment you feel from a colleague or a family member is a highly concentrated form of psychic energy. It is a signal that a profound shift in reality is occurring. The tension exists because two different levels of consciousness are occupying the same space, and the lower level is struggling to survive the presence of the higher. It appears to function as a law of nature that whenever a person claims a new level of self-mastery, the environment will immediately attempt to test the validity of that claim. This is why the path to self-realization is often a lonely one. The Jungian framework helps us understand that this loneliness is not a failure, but a sign of the individuation process. You are separating from the mass of undifferentiated human experience to become a unique, centered being. The strange reason people resent you is that you have stopped being a screen for their projections and have started being a source of your own light. As the mind begins to grasp this system, the nature of conflict changes. One stops asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" and begins to ask, "What part of the human experience am I representing that they cannot yet bear to see?" This shift in perception moves the individual from a state of victimhood to a state of profound psychological agency. You realize that the arrows of resentment are actually misdirected prayers for growth. The hostility is a distorted form of recognition. It is the only way a sleeping mind can acknowledge the presence of someone who is truly awake. However, this layer of understanding is only the beginning of the structural change. The behavioral patterns we observe in others are often echoes of the same patterns we carry within ourselves. To see the system clearly, one must look at how these invisible threads of influence have shaped their own history. The external world remains a chaotic and threatening place until the internal system is mapped and understood. This mapping requires a willingness to look into the abyss of one's own resentment toward others, finding the same mirrors we once feared. The integration of these insights creates a different kind of human, one who is no longer easily swayed by the opinions of the collective. When you understand the mechanics of the shadow, the evil or meanness of others loses its sting. It becomes data. It becomes a map of the hidden territories of the human soul. This doesn't mean the pain disappears entirely, but the meaning of the pain changes. It becomes the fuel for a deeper kind of wisdom, a grounding in reality that no amount of social praise could ever provide. Ultimately, the goal of the Jungian journey is not to be liked, but to be whole. Wholeness is a terrifying prospect for those who are committed to remaining fragmented. Therefore, the resentment of others is the tax one pays for the luxury of being a real person. This creates a final, complex realization. The very thing that makes you an outcast in certain circles is the very thing that makes you a king in your own internal kingdom. The struggle is not against the people themselves, but against the gravitational pull of the unconscious habits that seek to keep everyone in the dark. This deeper layer behaves differently than we expect. It suggests that the most intense conflicts are actually opportunities for the greatest psychological breakthroughs. When the friction is at its peak, the veil is at its thinnest. The moments of greatest social rejection are often the moments of greatest spiritual invitation. But to accept this invitation, one must be willing to let go of the need for external validation entirely. In the quiet hours of the night, a specific type of mental fatigue often sets in, arising not from physical labor, but from the constant effort of navigating hidden social currents. There is a recurring sensation of being watched or judged, a silent pressure that seems to emanate from the walls of one's own life. This internal disconnection manifests as a repetitive thought loop, wondering why certain gestures of goodwill are met with a cold, unyielding silence. It is the heavy burden of carrying a truth that others are not yet ready to hear, leading to a sense of profound isolation even in a crowded room. These patterns of internal friction are not unique to any one individual, but are part of a universal human struggle to maintain balance in a world of shadows. The mind begins to recognize the unseen mental pressure that comes from holding back one's full potential just to avoid upsetting the delicate equilibrium of a friend or partner. This recognition brings a subtle shift in the emotional landscape, moving from a place of confusion to a place of somber clarity. One starts to see the silent deals made with the world, the small ways we dim our own energy to keep the peace, and the quiet resentment that grows within us when we realize the cost of that peace. True transformation begins with the quiet act of watching the mind without the need to interfere. It involves noticing the sudden surge of defensiveness when a certain name is mentioned, or the subtle way the breath catches when someone else's success is announced. This awareness is not a sudden flash of lightning, but a gradual dawning of light over a vast internal landscape. By observing these reactions, the influence of the subconscious becomes a visible thread in the fabric of daily perception. One starts to see that the world is not happening to them, but is being interpreted through a series of ancient, internal filters. This ongoing process of self-observation allows the individual to stand in the center of their own experience, grounded and unmoving, even as the storms of external resentment swirl around them. The focus shifts from the behavior of the world to the clarity of the witness, creating a space where the old patterns of reaction no longer find a place to take root. The journey through the shadow reveals that the people who resent you are merely holding the pieces of your own story you have yet to finish writing. The friction of the world is the whetstone that sharpens the blade of the spirit, turning every insult into an invitation for deeper self-mastery. We move from the noise of the crowd to the silence of the center, where the opinions of others lose their weight against the gravity of our own truth. To be seen is to be judged, but to be whole is to be free. The mirror has been shattered, and in its pieces we finally see the vastness of the sky. The light you carry was never meant to be hidden.